gave us.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Books in the World. This is a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center, an organization that is apparently bringing a lot of joy to many aspiring writers and actual writers. Kevin Symmons is here today, who's been here before. This is your second or third book, and with a fourth coming out. But we're delighted to have you again, and you're an old hand at this, and we're going to have a good time talking about Out of the Storm. Out of the Storm was just published a couple of months ago, and,
yes,
and you've been out talking about it in many places.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, just welcome, and I hope you're going to have fun talking about this today.
Madeline, being with you is always fun.
Oh,
Absolutely.
Kevin.
Right, thank you. Yes.
Well, you were formerly president of the Cape Cod Writers Center. Tell us a little bit about that and about some other things that you're doing.
Well, I always tell the story. It's similar to those who have been in the service. When they ask for a volunteer to be the president, everybody else stepped backwards. So, no, I joined the Writers Center about 9 years ago after my first conference, and was on the board, and subsequently sort of spent several years on the executive committee doing different things. And 4 years ago, well, 5 years ago now, I'm sorry, I was elected the president. And it was a wonderful time. I like to think certainly those who, Marion Villamere and Jacqueline Loring and all the others before us, Susie Reed, people before us laid a great foundation. But I like to think that we've taken it a little bit further to a new level. 2 years ago, our Writers Conference, which is a broad-based conference and our signature event every year, was voted by Writer Magazine one of the top 5 in the United States.
That's fabulous.
So that's really, and I claim no credit for that at all, but give credit to Nancy Rubin Stewart, who's also an award-winning author, and our executive director, and people like Moira Powers, who's no longer with us, and you know, the staff that we have. So it's absolutely Janet, you know, who's with us
Janet
today.
Gardner
Janet
is
Gardner
the,
is the business manager now.
Right.
Yes. Sorry.
If you are interested in finding out more, there is a website, of course. It's CCW.
CapeCodWritersCenter.org, because it is a not-for-profit, so
okay.
people always get confused and they go to .com.
Cape Cod WritersCenter.org, and I think you have monthly events and lunches and the big conference in the summer, which is really quite full of events. Very packed.
And we're somewhat condensing it a little bit this summer, or they are condensing it a little bit this summer. It will be between the 7th and the 10th of August at the Cape Cod, the Hyannis Resort and Conference Center, right here on beautiful Cape Cod.
Right here. Well, as we're sitting here, it's getting ready for a snowstorm, and Christmas is right around the corner, but we can think about beautiful Cape Cod in the summer.
Absolutely.
However, we're going to be talking about Out of the Storm, which is a book that starts, it's in the summer, that storm, is it not?
It's in May.
Yeah. This is a thriller mystery romance, and you have been known to write romances and to speak, and we're not really going to talk too much about you being the male romance writer, because this book is not as much a romance as it is a thriller. It's the kind of thing you would see on television, and maybe you'll write the screenplay at some point for this.
Thank you. I doubt that, but thank you very much. And I'd love to see it on television. I doubt I'd be the one to write the screenplay, but thank you.
Yeah, but this has all the elements of a thriller and a mystery and a romance. It has CIA, it has bad guys, it has terrorism. It is a page turner, and you've delighted a few readers that you've had some nice reviews.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about this comment. The book is a classic novel of misdirection.
I think you and I have talked about this. We actually talked about this, not to dwell on another novel that I had written that you talked to me about. When I write a novel, I've always been engaged by some of the stories that we can read. There's an English author named Val McDermott who writes somewhat graphic and violent, I will say, mysteries. I think of things like, we talked a little bit about movies that we can associate with The Usual Suspects, The Sixth Sense, where you really don't know who the good guys and the bad guys are up until the final 15 or 20 pages. And that's what I wanted to do with Out of the Storm. It has, it's replete with I would say, interesting characters. There are naval officers, there are CIA people, there are bad guys, we think. As a matter of fact, we're not really sure until we get towards the end of the book whether and I use the quotation mark, heroine is a bad guy or a good guy. And that's part of the planning behind the book. I wanted people to be left in suspense, and as you say, ego aside, I wanted to try and make this into a page turner where they really didn't know exactly what was going on until they got to the last couple of chapters.
Yep, that certainly does that.
Thank you.
Tell us about the characters. You had Eric, Ashley. Eric and Ashley are the two main characters.
Absolutely. Eric is a young man he's 31 years old. He was, for 5 years, a Green Beret. He was an officer, a Green Beret team leader. He has come back from it. He was a Cape Cod native. He's a local hero, all-American wrestler. He went to Williams College on scholarship. He was brilliant. He speaks French. But he's also more than that. He's also a tough guy, and he's also a patriot. And after 9/11, Eric volunteered, went to OCS, and went into the Rangers, the Green Berets, and he spends 5 years, 5 hideous, long, I can't imagine what it would be like because I haven't done that, but 5 long years in Afghanistan and Iraq leading his team. When he arrives in Kuwait, his team has 10 members, which is the standard number in a Green Beret team. When he comes home, there's only 4 of them. And Eric has finally decided he's seen enough of tragedy, of war. Several places in the book he talks about that. He's seen young people. He's seen native Afghan children torn in half by Kalashnikovs. He's seen friends and fellow soldiers blown apart by IEDs, and he's come home because he wants something else. He believes there has to be something more beautiful and peaceful in the world. So he comes home to find that. He marries his childhood sweetheart, a young lady named Elaine Crawford, who he fell in love with when they were in junior high school, 6th grade, at 12 years old, comes home to marry her and to redo his father's somewhat disintegrating marina right here on the Bass River. It takes place right on the Bass River,
yeah.
Dennis Yarmouth area. But the real theme of the book is, I guess, and this somewhat, we can identify with this with some of the things that have gone on in the last year in this area. Not that that was written for that purpose, but is there any place really where we can escape evil? And unfortunately, Eric comes home and discovers that the answer may be no, there isn't. Eric is home for a year. He marries his sweetheart. They buy a nice home, overextend themselves, a nice cottage on the water. And one night, the beautiful Elaine, his childhood sweetheart, dies in obviously a tragic car accident. And she's pregnant at that time, and the baby survives for a very short period of time, and then also passes on, and his life is thrown into chaos. He loses himself, and now we'll get into the Ashley character, loses himself, and literally, as the title says, one night as he's observing what he calls his Friday night date with oblivion, on his what would have been his 3rd wedding anniversary, frankly inebriated and feeling sorry for himself, he hears a knock on the door. He goes to the door, and he opens the door in the middle of a terrible nor'easter in May, and there he's faced with a bedraggled, soaking wet young woman that he has a vague remembrance of because he's met her once before in his life at his brother's home. His brother's a petty officer in Norfolk, Virginia with the Navy, a ne'er-do-well according to Eric's thoughts. And Ashley has come, for what reason he cannot begin to imagine, seeking solace at Eric's residence.
I'm going to stop you there because
Sorry.
I don't want you to give any spoilers.
Okay.
We talked about this, and I'm
Okay.
going to follow your lead on that.
All right.
The Ashley character is very sweet, but she's a mystery.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't quite know, nor do we, for a long time. Moving the story along, Ashley has a little girl, and Eric has a mother-in-law. Both of them bond, and they have for some very nice character development there.
Thank you.
I found the story about the brother, also very interesting, which leads me to asking you a question about how you do your research on police procedurals, detectives, undercover, covert. I always think of this when I watch television, and I remember somebody once said about it was either LA Law or one of those, that all those stories come right out of the newspaper. But you know, they're these horrendous, complicated plots are really out there. You just have to look for them. They're there. Go right ahead.
No, people often say that fact is more interesting than fiction, and probably is true. I happen to have the good fortune. I have a very close friend who was a state police investigator, another close friend who works for the Plymouth County, was a detective with the Plymouth County domestic violence unit, which gets a little bit into some of what goes on in the story. And I also have a source working on another book right now, and it's one of those things, we joked about this, I can't divulge who it is, but someone I know who actually had some background in intelligence work. So I've used all their information and run this by them, as I have relative to some of the domestic violence and family issues which come to light early in the book, to try and make it a more accurate story. Arrogance aside, I always try and make my stories as realistic as possible.
You know, we didn't talk about this, but I'm going to give the audience an anecdote. I did hear a presentation by David Baldacci once, and he talked about being on a train between Boston and New York or something like that, talking on the phone to one of his sources for accuracy, and I think she was a police detective in New York City. And he's on the phone talking about the details of these crimes that he's trying to make sure he's got it right. And the people around him are sitting on the train looking at, like, who is this?
Is he about to murder somebody, right?
I know. And then he told somebody, well, I'm David Baldacci, I'm a writer. And they're like, oh, yeah, really? Really? You know? So excuse me for feeling that's it's relevant to what you're saying.
It's a
you
great
have
story.
to have a source of, is this ringing true kind of thing. And as we were saying, you do a good job of keeping people off balance to know whether or not these are the bad guys, or so both the real bad guys and the perhaps bad guys,
maybe,
they're all doing
Yes.
doing things quite accurately as they would. You mentioned Cape Cod settings. I certainly guessed about the Bass River. It's always fun to try to locate that. It's a lot of fun. And the other thing is about veterans. A lot of the emotion of the veterans and the characters, several of them are veterans. His boating marina partner there.
Bobby Cochran, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Yes, I was in the Army myself, served. I will not even insult real wartime veterans by saying that I could experience this. Done an equal amount of, not as extensively, because my character, though he comes back and is faced with a lot of trauma and does have nightmares and flashbacks, is, I don't know exactly, wouldn't say he's suffering from an obvious case of PTSD, but I think it'd be very hard to experience the kind of things that I talk about in the book and not suffer from some form of post-traumatic stress syndrome. But yes, I have talked to them and psychologists about that as well, to try and get a feel as to what the reaction might be relative to how they would approach different situations. And of course, in Eric's case, he's not only facing, it's sort of a, it can't seem to get any worse. He leaves one hideous environment, coming home to try and find a new life. And as soon as he seems to find this new life, he's faced with being thrown back, if you will, into the fire again. And we talked a little about this, and when we were doing some discussion earlier, sort of the old never give your characters an even break. You know, just when you think they've hit rock bottom, turn the thumb screws down a little bit more and make sure that they go one step lower on the ladder. So. Yeah, I've also done some research on that. I don't claim to be an expert at it, but I like to think that the characters I've have a lot of beta readers who've read this, and like to think that those people who have read it said that it's a fairly accurate description of what they think a veteran would feel. Yes.
And the brotherhood, the comradeship that survives. I mean, he reaches out when he's in danger, or he thinks he's in danger, or he needs information. He has a network of people that he calls right up, and they'll say, "Well, for you, I'll do it." You know. Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the things I think, and I know one of the things I think that we come away from, and I think of some of the vividly violent but great stories and novels, and not even novels necessarily, but historic volumes about things like Band of Brothers, Black Hawk Down. I know my father-in-law was a veteran in both World War II and Korea. What we find is whenever you talk to veterans, they always come down to the point, yes, I'm fighting for God and country or whatever, but what I'm really fighting for is the man in the foxhole, or the man or the woman sometimes today in the foxhole next to me, because he or she is fighting for me, and they're going to cover my back. And that's exactly the case. And that was one of the things I did really want to point out very, very much in the story, is Bobby, his friend, and the other, Ron Lipton, Lip as he's called, is a naval intelligence officer who Eric calls on for help when this mystery starts to develop, and he gets curious as to what's really going on with Ashley and his brother and so on and so forth. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think that's an important part of the story, and something that is very, very accurate. Not because I say it, but simply because it's the way
we've heard it before, but it was interesting seeing it play out in a domestic situation that, and especially being here in the Cape, where I'm sure there are plenty of veterans in boatyards and other places.
Absolutely.
So, that was good. You mentioned Lip, or Lipton, and I was interested in the fact as the story develops, and I'm not going to give a spoiler, and they try to
Thank you very much.
They try to get some background on a number of situations, and they find that there is no information about somebody in any files.
Right.
And I thought, oh, is that really true? Like if they looked me up, they would know where I went to college and all the other things that are available. I know they know where I live. They, meaning everybody, knows where I live, because
something. Madeline, it's hard to say. I can't say I've been in the inner workings of Langley or of the Pentagon, but I think we only need to remember some of the things we've come across recently, WikiLeaks and the NSA scandals and all those kind of things, to understand that. And I trust me, this is not Big Brother is watching you, and I'm not trying to create a paranoia by any means. That's not certainly what the book is about. But I think that there certainly is an awful lot of information available about all of us anywhere. And that, of course, as you pointed out, and I think I can say that because it happens fairly early in the book, that is one of the little hooks that we do discover in the book, that all of a sudden, as Eric starts to explore through Commander Lipton and through other sources, a detective friend of his in the Dennis Yarmouth Police Department, that all of a sudden Ashley has only a driver's license, and his brother's records, who is also a mysterious, shady character in this story, seem to have miraculously disappeared, with the exception of the fact that he's alive. And as a senior Navy petty officer, that doesn't hold water. So that adds more to the mystery. And as when you find out what's really going on, I think the audience, if you will, and the readers can accept that, because you know what's going to happen, and I know it's going to happen, but hopefully the readers don't at this point in time.
The readers don't, and they will have a lot of fun finding out. It is a lot of fun to read, as I've said before. I want to get back to something that I read on the internet about, you made a comment about your characters are in danger, and whereas this is about the Mary Higgins Clark comment that you made. And you said that the difference between your stories and some other types of mysteries is that in your stories that if we don't figure this out, the world is in danger, not just this character.
Glad to extrapolate on that. You were nice enough, and I'm not going to digress into another story. The earliest story you interviewed me on, called Rite of Passage. In that story, if the hero and heroine don't solve the problem, the world could be literally in danger. In this story, what I like to feel is that if Eric and perhaps Ashley, we'll have to find that out as we read the book, if Eric and Ashley or Eric and company don't solve the problem, I'm not sure about the world, but we know the United States could very well be in danger. And the reason I made that comment is because there are a lot of people who write thrillers. Grisham writes legal thrillers. Mary Higgins Clark is wonderful. She's the queen of romantic suspense. But a lot of times their problems, or the stakes, to use a word we use in teaching writing, STA, stakes, like stake in the ground, their stakes are somewhat personal or interpersonal. They involve relationships. They involve, did grandma burn down the barn with grandpa inside kind of thing. They involve local things. And I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, but in the novels that I've written so far that I refer to as thrillers, the stakes are mammoth. And in this case, as you know, if it turns out if Eric and, as I say, in his cadre of people don't discover what's going on and stop it, we could all be in very, very serious danger. So I guess that's what I would have to say. I certainly, those people are wonderful, far better writers and far more famous than I am.
I think that's a good theme to hang your hat on, or whatever you want to say, that you are making thrillers that deal with what are consequences would be very large. In the same vein, you talk about writing a good novel, and you talk about the 4 E's. Would you like to talk about that? I think that was very interesting.
Yeah, I do, as all writers do. I blog, and that one actually was, I think, on Romance University. I was invited, which I was very flattered to do. We want to educate people. We want to entertain them. We want to energize them, and we also want to evoke emotion. And I think the big difference in romance, and I've been writing romance, although I write obviously other things, this is much more of a thriller. The big thing that I like to evoke, and this goes back to a mentor of mine who was actually president of Romance Writers, who taught at Brown, and who's written 100 bestsellers. I was fortunate enough to be one of her students, and she always stressed the most important thing in writing a novel, certainly an interpersonal novel between two people, or a man and a woman, or a father and son, or whatever, is to bring out emotion. And I like to think, in this case, as you've referred to, we have a brother, we have 2 brothers who may be estranged, we're not sure about, we have friendships, we have veteran relationships, and of course we have a man and a woman who may end up being close to each other, but we're not sure, because we're not sure exactly whether Ashley is, if I can use one of the taglines, whether Ashley is the dream Eric had prayed for to reclaim his life, or whether she's a nightmare he can't recover from.
Well, I haven't talked too much about Eric and Ashley because you really don't want to give away the story.
No.
And as much as you worked so hard to build up the suspense, we want to make sure people go out and read this book and get it. I know you're going to be at the Cape.
Books by the Sea tonight.
Books by the Sea tonight. Unfortunately, our viewers will probably not be hearing this, but they have a nice, actually they have a nice room there for the Cape Cod Writers Center books. That's at the Osterville bookstore, and I'm sure that Titcomb's and Sandwich and the others do as well as the libraries. I mean, I always have to plug the libraries, as people know that I am a librarian, and that you can get virtually anything through the interlibrary loan networks, trucks that travel all over the Cape and everywhere, and can get books from anywhere for you.
Absolutely.
But before we go on, we have a little less than 5 minutes left, believe it or not.
Wow, fun. No, it has. Thank you. You've done wonderful.
I think we hit the highlights of the book.
I hope so.
I don't know if